Okay, let's talk about creativity. For the next few minutes, we are going to dive deep into Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic. And this is a book that doesn't just, offer tips, it totally rewrites our entire relationship with inspiration and, yeah, with fear.
So let's just start with this one big, kind of provocative question that's really at the heart of her work. What if that whole story we've been sold, the one that says great art requires great suffering, that you have to be some kind of tortured genius? What if that's not just wrong, but it's the very thing that's been holding you back?
And that question, it leads us right to the first big idea we have to just dismantle. This really deep-seated, almost romantic myth of the suffering artist. I mean, think about it, right? Every movie you've seen about a painter or a writer, what's the vibe? They're brooding, they're in pain, they're sacrificing everything. Gilbert says no. That is a toxic and totally unnecessary way to live.
This is the fundamental shift in thinking. The old myth says that to make great art, you have to trade in your happiness. But Gilbert just flips that completely. She argues that joy and curiosity, well, they're much better, more sustainable fuels for a creative life. The goal isn't to become some special genius. It's about reclaiming the creativity that's already part of you, just for being human.
This really gets to the core of it. It's not just some personal hang-up we have. It's a cultural script we've all been taught. The story goes that if you're not struggling, if you're not agonizing, you're not a real artist. That the pain is where the good stuff comes from. But what if that story is just getting in your way?
So, if suffering isn't the big bad villain of our creative story, then what is? Gilbert says it's fear, but she reframes it in a way you're probably not expecting.
We love to dramatize our fear, right? We cast it as this unique, terrifying monster that we have to go out and conquer. Gilbert's perspective is the exact opposite. Your fear is actually boring. It's just a primitive survival instinct doing its job. It's super predictable, it's not original at all, and it basically says the same tired things to everyone. And here's why fear is always going to be part of the deal. Creativity, just by its nature, is a leap into the unknown. You're making something that didn't exist a minute ago. You have no idea how it's going to turn out or how people will react. And your fear, that ancient lizard part of your brain designed to keep you safe, it absolutely hates that uncertainty. So of course it shows up. The trick is to just not be surprised when it does.
So what's the move? What do you do? Well, Gilbert offers this brilliant metaphor of a road trip. You don't try to fight your fear or kick it out of the car. That's exhausting. You just acknowledge it. You turn around and say, "Hey, fear, I see you. You can come along for the ride, but you're in the back seat. You don't get to touch the map. You don't get to mess with the radio, and you absolutely do not touch the steering wheel. You're in charge, not your fear." Okay, so let's pivot a little. We've been talking about our internal world of fear. Now let's look at the external world of inspiration. And this is where things get a little, well, magical.
Okay, stay with me here because this is one of the biggest and maybe strangest concepts in the book. What if ideas aren't things you generate inside your own head? What if they are separate, energetic things just floating around the universe, looking for the right person to help them become real? It completely changes the game. You're not a genius pulling things out of thin air. You're a collaborator. And this introduces this really interesting tension. An idea picks you. It sends you an invitation. But if you ignore that invitation for too long, if you neglect it, the idea might just get impatient and go find someone else. I mean, think about it. Have you ever had a brilliant idea, sat on it for too long, and then a year later, you see someone else bring that exact thing to life? Maybe that wasn't a coincidence. This story about the poet Ruth Stone just captures that feeling perfectly. She said she could feel poems coming at her from across the landscape, like a thundering herd of horses, and she'd have to just run, get a pencil, and try to catch it on the page before it galloped right on past her. See, creativity isn't always about building. Sometimes it's about being ready to catch something. That's the dance. So if these ideas are out there, and our job is to work with them, then what are the rules of engagement? How do we actually live this creative life in a practical, day-to-day way? This leads to a really cool idea she calls creative entitlement, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It's this radical belief that you are simply allowed to be here, that you have a voice, and you have the right to use it. You don't need a diploma, you don't need an agent, you don't need a gatekeeper to approve. You just have to give yourself the permission slip. You're allowed. Right now. This is a mantra that can just break the spell of perfectionism. It's something Gilbert learned from her mother, and it is pure gold. So many of us get paralyzed by this fear that our work won't be perfect. You rewrite the first sentence 100 times and you never actually write the book. This phrase reminds us that just finishing something, getting it done, is a victory. You can always make it better later, but you can't edit a blank page. I love this concept because it is so brutally honest. Gilbert has this term for the not-so-fun parts of any passion, the shit sandwich. And every single passion has one. Being a writer isn't just about moments of genius. It's also about rejection letters and frustrating edits. True passion isn't just about the parts you love. It's about what crappy parts you're willing to put up with to keep doing the work you love. So all of these ideas, giving yourself permission, forgetting about perfection, figuring out what you're willing to endure, they all lead to this one final, crucial choice. It's about the entire mindset you bring to your creative life. And here are the two paths. You've got the martyr, that's our suffering artist from the beginning. They take it all so seriously, they're kind of addicted to the struggle, and they're tormented by the outcome. But then you have the trickster. The trickster is light, they're playful, they're guided by curiosity, and they're in love with the process, not just the final product. One of these paths leads to burnout. The other leads to a joyful, sustainable life. And here is the great paradox. It's when you lighten up, when you stop taking yourself and your work so deadly seriously, that the really deep, meaningful, almost divine inspiration can actually get through. Seriousness and heaviness, they can actually block the magic. It's playfulness that opens up the channel. So how do you do that? How are you supposed to be a playful trickster and also a disciplined creator? How do you hold the joy and the effort in your hands at the same time? The answer lies in embracing one last, really powerful paradox. And this, right here, is the ultimate key to a sane, creative life. You have to hold both of these truths at the exact same time. You have to treat your work with reverence, like it is the most important thing in the world. And at the same time, you have to realize that in the grand scheme of things, it's just a little dance. It's a game, and it doesn't matter at all. That contradiction, that's what sets you free. Which, of course, brings this all back to you. Let's just forget about genius and perfection and suffering for a second. Let's end with a much simpler question. What are you curious about? What's that thing you could just talk about for hours? What makes you feel that spark? Because according to Gilbert, that's it. That's your starting point. That is the clue that leads you to your own big magic.